So, good morning. It's a pleasure to talk to you today about making Siberian Turkic collections visible with my presentation in the open. I will today go through just a few different stages to explain a bit our processes of making these materials available. I'll do that by first talking about the British Library, and then going into a bit about the collections that I manage, the Turkish and Turkic collections, before looking at the Siberian Turkic materials in those collections themselves, and how we catalog and curate them, and what some of the issues are regarding the cataloging and curation of them. And finally, a bit of information about things beyond the catalog in terms of ways in which we can make these visible or discoverable without relying just on our electronic catalog. So the British Library is the state library of the United Kingdom. The United Kingdom has a few different national libraries in the various home nations as well. It was founded in 1753 with a grant of manuscripts at that point to the British Museum by King George III, and then gradually a few other collections were purchased or acquired in other ways and incorporated until 1973, when an act of parliament created the library itself. In the 1990s, a separate building was created. Here you can see it in the center, and that's where we reside today, close to St. Pancras. We're the legal deposit, and so a copy of every book in the in the United Kingdom has to be deposited with the library every year. And we're also a store of national treasures, so we hold written works that are of great importance to British history, but also to world history within our holdings. We have about 170 million items currently within the library's holdings, and these are texts, their sounds, their data, their images. So most of our materials are books, manuscripts, and periodicals, but we do also have quite a lot of other types of information. From these 170 million items, about 30,000 printed items and 4,000 manuscripts are in the Turkic languages, or in the Turkish and Turkic collections. And here what I mean is over 30 different languages and dialects, most of which are part of the Turkic language family, according to linguistics, but also a few other languages that are of importance to the history of Anatolia and Mesopotamia. So languages like Kurdish and Syriac and Western Armenian. These are works that span from the 9th century right up to the 21st. So you have on the far left-hand side a 15th century Nusratnama, the history of Central Asia in Çağatay. We have on the right-hand side a 19th century Mevlud from Anatolia, but also right up to the current time in the center, a book of a Tatar folktale, Mural Baybatsır, produced in 2020. And of course, when we narrow down even further, we get the Siberian Turkic materials. And here I'm talking about 9 different languages, often referred to as the Northeastern Turkic languages, which when we're cataloging materials go into 4 different language codes. So we have Sakha, Tuvan, and Altai are 3 languages that are identified as separate languages within the collections. And then 6 other languages go into an other category, which creates a few problems. And the other category includes languages like Chulum and Shor, but it also includes other Turkic languages not from Siberia, so languages like Gagauz and Qashqai from Moldova and Iran, as well as historic Turkic languages like Old Turkic and Old Uyghur, and then non-Turkic languages, and a number of different Mongolic and Tungusic languages, which are also included into that. So it makes it quite difficult to determine all of the different works that might be in these languages held by the library. Overall, though, what I can estimate is that we have a little under 200 works in Sakha, Tuvan, and Altai, as well as other languages. Sakha is our largest group with about 75 items, followed by Tuvan and Altai, and then a few each in some of the other smaller languages. Most of our works are from the post-1945 era. So as you can see on the left-hand side, we have items such as this Altai literary journal, Jildis, from the 1980s. And these were often acquired through a number of different exchanges with national libraries. So we would work with the national libraries of Sakha, of Tuva Republic. We would work with the National Library of Russia, and also of Azerbaijan, Uzbekistan, Kazakhstan, to exchange materials up until the 1990s. And then after that, we began to simply purchase materials. So that means that we have to go out to find new items through commercial means. But we also do have a small collection of pre-1945 materials. So on the right-hand side, you can see here an Altai reader, something similar to the previous presentation, a look at school books here, a book intended to assist students to read in the Latin script from 1934 in the Altai language, at that point referred to as Urot. A very few number of books that are part of the library's collections are digitized. This is usually a factor of copyright issues. And so here you have a Gospels, Chrzczenia Ewangelia, which is both in Russian and in Sakha. It's made available through Google Books. And there are only a few items such as this, which can be freely accessed through Google. But most items, because of copyright, cannot be digitized and have to be consulted in the library. A separate sort of aspect of the Siberian Turkic materials is the fact that through the 1940s to the 1990s, many of the works were actually scholarly works, and this often meant that they were multilingual. So the works that are incorporated in the categories such as Sakha or Tuvan might actually be in Russian and Sakha or Tuvan, or in German and Sakha or Tuvan, English, French. They were often works that were dedicated to the study of the language or the culture or the literature of these peoples, and they skew the collections a bit in terms of how we can actually understand publishing histories in these languages. They're often meant to be intended much more as the actual Tuvan or Sakha components, or Chor or Chulam, are meant as examples and not actually just spontaneous or organic literary production. So gradually, over the last few years, we've been trying to increase our purchases of fiction and oral history particularly, but other topics as well, music, cookery, local histories, things like that, to have more spontaneous and organic literary production within these languages, and also to reflect more faithfully the publishing cultures and histories of these language groups. We catalog these items according to Mark 21 RDA, so similar to the Library of Congress and other Euro-Atlantic institutions, and we use Library of Congress authorities. Many of these are often very focused on scholarly activity in the United States and also Western Europe. But when you have sort of a Cyrillic script work that is more geared towards a scholarly audience, it works fairly well. So here I have a literary journal in Altai from the 1980s, where it's quite easy in terms of transliteration and the identification of the organization. The problem starts to come in when we have to have more original script entries, and more enhanced, rather, original script entries. When, for example, names enter the authorities are recorded in the United States or in Western Europe in their Russian form, but actually there might be a very different way of naming people according to the local, to the indigenous culture. And so we have here, for example, a work in Tuvan, excuse me, and where you can see that the name of the author is according to a Tuvan nomenclature. It's a Tuvan traditional way of naming individuals, but when the name went into the authorities, it went in as a Russian name, using the Russian patronymic. So the idea here is to make it more accessible so that the authors can be discovered whether they use their Tuvan or their Russian name, or their Sakha or their Russian name, and to have as much information so that the authorities are complemented by indigenous understandings of how the work should be called and how they should be attributed. Occasionally, this means we also have to use expanded text access. So normally we would just transliterate the title and the author, and we wouldn't try to give additional information. The idea is transliteration targets people who speak English, German, French, and people who use the Latin script. But an additional way that we're trying to increase accessibility is to then, for example, for a Latin script, for something from the 1930s, have transliteration into Cyrillic, contemporary Cyrillic script for Altai, so that it's discoverable for someone who reads and writes in Altai today and is searching online, and then a transliteration into the standard transliteration scheme for the Library of Congress. So essentially making the works discoverable not only for people from the United States or Western Europe who speak a Western European language, but primarily for people who are from the communities these items were sourced from and who might be looking for specific works. So how it works, for example, is here a 1934 Shore reader produced in Novosibirsk, when it goes into the catalog, what we have here is the original script Latin title. And as you can see here, the original name is given according to the Latin script, but then a Russian transliteration is given in terms of the compiler. We try to provide as much information about production as well, so that if you're looking for example, publishers, you're looking for cities that were important, you're looking for different actors, not just the author, and you can also find that information as well. And then here we've got, of course, the Cyrillic transliteration for the title as best as possible, because language changes, of course, from the 1930s up to the contemporary day, and then a transliteration of that as well. So that there's just a greater number of ways that you can actually enter the catalog, you can find these items, and that the focus is not on someone who's working in North America or Western Europe, but on any user who might be interested in using these works. The catalog is not the only way, of course, that we can highlight these collections. So one way that we try to increase information and understanding about them is by creating collection guides. So in the bottom right-hand corner, we have here a collection guide for Central Asian Turkic, which includes Siberian Turkic languages, gives an understanding about what sorts of materials we hold, the languages that we hold them in, how they were collected, and how we continue to grow the collections. We also have blogs. So the bottom left-hand corner here, a blog about Turkic Buddhist material, the top right-hand about indigenous languages in Russia, just using a variety of different blog sites to give context, talk about the materials that we hold, the context in which they were created, how they connect to different other published materials, and how we actually account for them today, not just in terms of the language, but also in terms of the broader subjects. If you're interested in Buddhist materials, but also want to find things in Shor, in Altai, in Kalmyk, in Tuvan. And then we continually try to reach out to communities to understand how to improve how we account for these materials. Reach out to users, whether they're in Siberia or they're elsewhere, to understand what might be a better way of accounting for these materials, what might be missing, and how we might speak about them in a more respectful and also useful way to increase accessibility. So I've provided quite a bit of information now, perhaps a bit fast, but you can find more information about the materials we hold on the blog sites that I mentioned. The top is for the entire Asian and African Studies section. The bottom one is my own personal one, specific about the Turkic collections. Or you can follow me on Twitter, where I post continuously some images from the items we have. Or finally, please do email me if you have a specific question about some of the materials that we hold in the collections. So thank you very much, and I look forward to your questions.